And now we welcome you to our talking point session. India and Indonesia have been having close relations for a long time, even before their independences. To mark 6 decades of close relations, both countries will be organizing a series of events this year. In order to know more about this growing relationship, in our studio we invited Deputy Production Manager of the Jakarta Post, Mr. Veeramalla Anjaiah. Mr. Anjaiah has been covering the relations between the two countries for more than 2 decades. Now welcome to our talking point session, Mr. Veeramalla.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah.
Okay, now you've been here 20 odd years?
Yeah, 20 years. I came here in 91.
You came here as an Indian?
Yeah, as an Indian, but now I have become an Indonesian because I took Indonesian citizenship in 2010.
Okay. During your experience or your lifetime observing the Indonesian-Indian relations, you studied Southeast Asian
Studies.
Southeast Asian studies, right? Are there any features worth mentioning?
Yeah, of course. The first thing in both countries, many people do not realize that actually they are neighbors. India and Indonesia are maritime neighbors. Then at the same time also, the relations are not just only 6 decades old. Even we have the cultural and trade relations with Indonesia and India more than 2 millennia, 2000 years.
Okay.
So for the long time ago, there have been contacts between the two countries. Then even during the freedom struggle also, both countries cooperated and helped each other. Even like, for example, in the late 1940s, India organized 2 international conferences. One is called Asian Relations, then another one is called a special conference on Indonesia to support Indonesia's freedom. So after that, then after the independence, India became independent in 1947, Indonesia became independent in 1945. So both cooperated, and then they launched this movement called non-aligned movement. I think it started all in Bandung in the 1955, and then they cooperated, and then the time went on until the 1990s. But in the 1990s, India launched a new policy called Look East policy, under which they want to work very closely with the countries in Southeast Asia, including Indonesia and East Asian countries. So this changed dramatically the relations between Indonesia and India. So they realized that we need each other, because Indonesia is very rich in natural resources. At the same time, Indian economy for the last more than 10 years has been growing at a rate of 9%. 8-9% it has been growing. It needs a lot of resources. Indonesia has a lot of resources. So they both are working very closely, and there is also another milestone in both countries' relations. In 2005, they signed a strategic partnership agreement between the two countries. This has changed completely the entire gamut of relations between the two countries.
Okay, mentioning resources,
Yeah.
India has been growing at a rate of 9% per annum for the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
So it's hungry for resources.
Yeah.
Indonesia has the goods.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's buying from Indonesia.
Yeah, that's right.
In turn, what is Indonesia buying from India?
Yeah, for example, I mean, we start from the Indian side. India has been buying heavily Indonesia's coal for its power generation, as well as palm oil, because I think India is one of the biggest buyer of Indonesian palm oil, and also rubber and so many other natural resources. At the same time, Indonesia is buying from India in a small quantity. You cannot believe, because now Indonesia has been enjoying a huge trade surplus, only the second after Japan. Like for example, I will give you one statistics. Like last year in 2011, The total trade was, 2010, because the full year results were not yet out. So in 2010, the trade was $13 billion. Out of $13 billion, Indonesia's exports to India were $10 billion, and Indonesia's imports were only $3 billion. So that means $7 billion of trade surplus. So Indonesia has been benefiting this huge trade. But at the same time also, Indian companies have been coming to Indonesia. They are looking for opportunities in so many sectors, like you name it, like in the coal mining, and also in the energy sector, and also in the infrastructure projects. I think recently, when during the last time His Excellency President Susilo's visit to India, so they have signed so many agreements. I think the investments will total some $15 billion to build roads, bridges, and railway lines, and also some big aluminum refinery plants. So many activities, so many Indian companies are coming here to explore the possibilities.
How about in cultural and tourism? What do we share? How do we share it?
Yeah, there is one unique thing about both countries. India, I mean, has a large number of Hindus in the world, because India is not a religious country; it is a secular country. So the majority of people, population is Hindus. But at the same time, also we have a large number of Muslims, though they constitute only 12% of the population. But it is the second biggest Muslim population after Indonesia. Indonesia is the #1 in the world, but India has more than 150 million people of Muslims there. Then for the last 2000 years, both countries exchanged culture, because the Buddhism and Hinduism, they have very close these cultural links were there for so many times, because it came through trade. And then we can see some phenomenal structures like Borobudur, Prambanan Temple. At the same time also, if you see, we have two landmarks. People, whenever hear about India, they always think about Taj Mahal. Taj Mahal is actually an Islamic shrine. It was a tomb built by an Islamic king. Then at the same time, people heard about Indonesia. It is a Borobudur temple, which is, I mean, a Buddhist temple actually. But I mean, of course, this shows their openness and their tolerance towards living together. I mean, these kind of things exist between the two countries. And at the same time, I think we have this Indian Bollywood movies. I think Indonesians like these Bollywood movies very much. But only the aspect right now which is needed urgent attention, that is tourism sector. Because as I told earlier, that Indian economy has been growing around 9% for the last 10 years. And at the same time, India has a very big middle class, which is around 250 million people. So they have a lot of money and they love to travel abroad. So they have been coming to Southeast Asia, mainly Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. So around 14 million tourists visited last year. So, but out of this 14 million, unfortunately, only 140,000 tourists visited Indonesia. Maybe that 140,000, maybe more than half only Bali. So that's why now the government, especially the Indonesian government, realized that we should focus on Indian tourists. Her Excellency Mari Pangestu, the Minister of Tourism and Creative Economy, recently said that Indonesia will open a tourism office in India, and also Garuda Airlines also wants to start a new route between Bali and New Delhi. So this is these things, I think, in the future will help a lot to attract Indian tourists to Indonesia.
Okay. Relations.
Yeah.
6 decades.
Yeah.
Usually when you see commemoration of 20th anniversary of relations between country A and country B,
yeah,
why do we name it 6 decades? Is there something behind this?
Yeah, actually, as I told earlier, that these two countries' relations are very peculiar, because generally, normally in the diplomacy, two countries sit together and they sign agreement that we start this diplomatic relation. But in case of India, Indonesia, because both they are neighbors, close friends, they have been cooperating much before. So that's why both countries decided to celebrate this year to commemorate the 6 decades of diplomatic relations between the two countries. That is very unique. So as part of that, I think the Indian embassy diplomats told me that they are planning a series of activities. Like for example, recently they done it at Prambanan, in which Indian artists and Indonesian artists, they practice it together and they performed Sendrathari Ramayana, the Ramayana dance drama, in front of the Prambanan temple. That was very unique, and I think the same troupe will perform in India later. Then also I think both countries' foreign ministries also planning to launch a book on 6 decades of relations between the two countries. That will also very an important event. But also I think this year, because India joined the ASEAN as a dialogue partner in 1992, so this year it will be 20 years. So in that to mark that occasion, India will be hosting a commemorative ASEAN-India summit. For that summit, I think His Excellency President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono will go there, and at the same time, I think they are planning to come by and make it as a state visit also. So this will lay a foundation for that. But actually, also I think both countries realized the importance and the strategic interest. I think now they want to explore the possibility of signing a free trade agreement in the name of, like, I mean, they say comprehensive economic cooperation agreement.
Okay.
Agreement.
We have to stop here. Thank you for being here.
Welcome. Thank you. Yeah.
And that was our talking point interview with Mr. Veeramalla Anjaiah on diplomatic ties between India and Indonesia. We'll be back more from reports from West Kalimantan and Sulawesi, but after this is the Maghrib call of prayer. Stay with us.